I'm Dr. Anthony Harper here, blessed to be with Amy Zewe of Jerusalem Connection and the Jerusalem Connection Report. And thank you for joining me today for a new update. And that is correct, that's Jerusalem Connection Report.
Yeah, so our weekly news outreach is called the Jerusalem Connection Report, and our organization is called the Jerusalem Connection International, but sometimes for short, we just say the Jerusalem Connection.
Okay, and you have a website you'd like for people to know about?
We do. It's www.thejerusalemconnection, no spaces, .us. And you can get all of our information and our social media links on and our blog posts on that website.
I know you're joining me today concerned about your recent Israel, if you're Polish, your Poland trip, and you have the Israel concerns with the Jerusalem Connection. What did you learn from your trip to Poland about Israeli-U.S. relations, or I would say Polish Israeli.
So there's several nuances to it. So thank you for having me on so that I can share a little bit about this experience. The trip was initiated by, and I was the guest of the Polish embassy in Washington, D.C., and they took a delegation of folks. There was about 8 of us. I was the only Christian, everybody else was Jewish. And the goal was to sort of have a study tour of some key areas of Poland to examine and then take that information and improve both Jewish-Polish relations as well as the Israel-Polish relationship, which is one that is complex and nuanced. And what I discovered, our organization spends a lot of time looking at education, particularly in America, K-12 education, college, undergraduate education, seminary education, and graduate school, general graduate school. And on my red alerts, I often expose a lot of anti-Semitism that creeps into all of these faculties, student groups, and even the texts and readings that our younger children need to read. So in that context, our organization has a motto. Our motto is to inform, educate, and activate Christians to support the Jewish people and Israel, and to tell the story of Israel and the Jewish people, both ancient and modern. And what I discovered on my week trip, thanks to the Polish embassy, is that there is a huge block of history that is missing from all of our educations. I mean, I was on a trip with Jewish people, many of whom were descendants of Polish Jews who somehow survived the Holocaust or got out beforehand, who also didn't understand the 1,000 years of rich Jewish history and oftentimes peaceful coexistence with the Catholic, Orthodox, and later Lutheran and Protestant churches in what is now identified as Poland, but certainly in the bulk of what was Central Europe and what was sitting just to the east of Germany. So learning so much about missing pieces of history, and there's a variety of reasons why they're missing, and that's what our organization is going to start to focus on, is to say, how can we, in order to be a true friend of Israel, a true friend to Poland, and a true friend to all of its people, whether they're Jewish or non-Jewish, you have to understand their story. And sometimes these folks themselves don't know their story because of the Soviet occupation from 1945 to 1989. So what we're doing right now at the Jerusalem Connection is working on how to formulate this 1,000 years of history, and what does that mean to Jewish people today? The descendants of those folks, that many of them live in 2 places. Most of the Polish Jews, because there was like 0 Polish people in Poland after the Holocaust, the Nazi occupation, they went 2 places. They went to Israel and they went to America, right? And some went to other parts of Europe and a few went to Australia, but in bulk, those were the 2 places. So now we've got these 75 years of hurt, of trauma, we're 3 generations, sometimes even 4 generations into the survivors of these people. And what does that mean to the current policies and the current policy makers in Israel and in Poland. So, I mean, I was there for a week. We had 18-hour days. We were meeting with archivists, government officials, ministers of this, ministers of that, museum directors, people reemerging the Jewish communities, revitalizing the remnant that is left. Most of the Jews in Poland who are practicing Jewish people are people that didn't know they were Jewish until the last 10 or 20 years. And they found out their roots, that their grandparents or parents were hidden during the Holocaust and given fake papers and given to Catholic families or whatever. And that doesn't negate that faith that they might have, but it certainly connects them to their Jewish roots and gives a lot of people, including the non-Jews, a real thirst to understand, A, what really happened in the 20th century and what was like before that, which is why when the Nazis invaded Poland, the Jewish people felt so betrayed, right? They were living, the largest population of Jewish people in the world was in what was Poland at the time. And it had 1,000 years of thriving. And yes, there was violence and pogroms and expulsions and laws that weren't very friendly to the Jews in and out of this history. But for the most part, other than New York and other parts of America like Charleston, but New York had the other largest population by 1939, you have to ask yourself what was going on in this area that the 50% of the world's Jewry lived there, and they were thriving. They were parts of the university systems. They were local mayors and governors and lawyers and doctors and professors and theologians. And they lived side by side with the Orthodox Church in the East and the Catholic Church and the newly emerged several hundred-year-old Protestant Church. Not that there wasn't plenty of anti-Semitism in the churches, but as far as the day-to-day life of the peoples living amongst each other. And then that suddenly turned. It literally turned with the Nazi invasion. And so was the Polish people the victims, or were they the perpetrators? Were the Polish people heroes, or were they villains, or was it a mix? And that's the story that's still unfolding. And that story is unfolding for us as Gentiles in the Western world, and it's unfolding for Jewish people, including those that left Europe and live in Israel, which is why the Polish-Israel relations is so delicate. The first Polish embassy, the first Israeli embassy to exist on the planet after Israel was formed in 1948 was in Warsaw. And it was located in what is now the Bristol Hotel on the second floor. And that's where my hotel room was when I was in Warsaw. And then in 1967, because the Soviets, remember, were in Poland at the time, Poland was a puppet state of the Soviet Union, those fell apart. All of that relationship fell apart. And then in 1989, when Poland got its freedom, its independence, that's when it started to sort of reconnect. And I don't know if you're aware, but just recently there was a little bit of a kerfuffle between Israel and the Polish government because of the trips that Israel brings its high school or young people on to Poland for tours, study tours of Poland. And it's the same phenomenon that happens in America, because I know people that have done it. They do this death camp tour, right? They bring the students in, or they bring the pastors in, or they bring the college students in. They store Treblinka and Auschwitz and a couple other, the Warsaw Ghetto, and then they get out, right? There's no further context. So what is Poland remembered as? Poland is, you walk away with Poland as a place of death. Poland is the Holocaust. Well, Poland was a victim of the Holocaust because the Nazis invaded, and then they had to deal with the Russians after the war was over. So there's so much history that's unknown, and because of that, the bad taste in the mouth of whether it was the descendants of Jews who managed to escape and survive the Holocaust years, or just the lack of education as far as that part of the world, people don't realize that history, that 1,000 years of history, brings us what we both celebrate and mourn today. The Ashkenazi Jewish culture, right? The whole, that I don't want to say sect, that's not the right word, but the culture of Judaism, in addition to its rich religion and its rabbis who study the Hebrew text that we as Christians benefit greatly from, that is sort of lost. The context of all of that and the value of it is lost in a narrative that just puts Poland as the perpetrator, the villain, the betrayer, when they themselves were also, 3 million Poles were killed by the Nazis, that were non-Jewish, 3 million Jewish Poles were killed by the Nazis, 6 million Polish people were killed. But beyond those 6 years, what was the 1,000 years before it that led to such a rich culture, leads to a lot of the literature that we revere today, the dietary, the cuisine that we all love and share with today, the Yiddish phrases that managed to make it into our movies and plays, and in New York, where I grew up, into my everyday vocabulary. So that's sort of what I wanted to relay to you and to your audience, is that the Jerusalem Connection is going to be taking as much time as it takes to make sure that we build something and partner with Jewish folks and other Christian Zionist organizations to bring resources and educational resources, and even trips. We might even plan some study tours as well that pastors can participate in, or professors or college students, so that they can really take on a firsthand acquisition of this reality and then bring it back. And that would be included in the greater scope of what I would call Israel studies, because if you're going to study the whole history of the Jewish people, you need to include this 1,000 years and then the 80 or so since of Jewry in Poland and the aftermath of the Holocaust.
I was curious about the current Russia's war with Ukraine. How did it have any impact on your trip to Poland?
It didn't have any impact on the logistics, but what we did find is that the Jewish communities, the JCC in Krakow, for example, as well as the Polish government, which is as controversial as a government as ours is, as far as people thinking it's too far to the right, or people think, it's a divided country politically. And what I can say is the Christian communities, the government agencies, as well as the very tiny and budding Jewish communities, all agree on this topic. And that is, Putin is horrible and he needs to get out of Ukraine, and they're scared to death that they'll end up on the border, what is now the border of Ukraine, and that the people of the Ukraine are the ones who are suffering. So the help that's being offered to the women and children that have sought refugee status in Ukraine has been phenomenal. There's no refugee camps, none whatsoever. Women and children are given housing, whether it's in people's homes. Polish people are opening their own homes to take in refugees, mostly women and children. They're getting they're fast tracking papers so that these people can have jobs. The kids are going right into the public school. And the hope for many of them is that they'll be able to go home, that when this is over, they can go back to Ukraine. But if some choose to assimilate and stay in Poland, my perception was that the Polish people be very accepting of that. There's a labor shortage anyway in Poland, so having these educated, able-bodied young people who are able to work in various IT is a big industry, certainly service industries and whatnot. But there's a very unified, from all sides of religion and politics in Poland, a very unified effort and commitment to helping Ukraine defend itself, push the Russians back, and help their people, really actually help the people so that they can sustain their families, sustain their livelihoods, and if they choose to, go back to their homes.
Very, very emotional issues that are happening, and what Polish people are experiencing, and I'm sure a lot of fear about Russia's maybe invading of their country as well. With President Biden just having a trip to Europe, I wonder if that had any impact on your trip as well.
We were so busy going from appointment to appointment that we didn't talk about it, that we didn't notice it. And we haven't had our group reconvene for a debriefing just yet. We got back on July 2nd. We're just now planning our debriefing over Zoom. And then all of our participants, except 3, were from the DC area. So we will be meeting in person. But our goal is not to be overtly political in this, but to raise up the facts and awareness of what's going on so that people can then voice their democratic voice appropriately. Our particular group was a mixture of Republicans and Democrats. It was bipartisan. We all feel that this issue with Russia and Putin is not a partisan issue. It is a matter of preserving democracy. There's nuances about funding it and making sure the funds are traced and there's transparency. That, of course, is an issue. But I mean, from what I understand about Biden's visit, is it showed an optic of solidarity with the Ukrainian president and the Ukrainian people, but a little bit insubstantial. You know, the gaffes in his speeches and not even letting President Zelensky answer some of the questions from the press himself. Biden was interrupting him with sort of flippant remarks. I don't know what's going to come of that meeting. I do know that the Congress, the people in Congress are looking at it carefully, and the Americans are divided on the topic for sure. We don't want American boots on the ground there, but we also don't want the Russians in Poland or Sweden or you know, the Eastern Bloc, which has enjoyed democracy since 1989. We don't want to see that fall.
Thank you for sharing the update on this. And once again, your website for the Jerusalem Connection is
www.thejerusalemconnection.us, no spaces.
Thank you, Amy, for joining us to give this very important update regarding Poland and Israeli relations.
Israel, go ahead.
I have a question about how would your comment be to our audience concerns about foreign government intrusion in Israel, to working to foment the riots and protests in Israel, to undermine the ongoing judicial reform. And there's also the issue about a lot of evangelical Christians are very supportive of Israel's right to their land. They oppose the two-state idea. What would you say to those issues?
I will say that we disagree. We support the two-state solution. I think we've made that very clear with respect to judicial reform. As the administration has said on a number of occasions, both U.S. and Israeli democracy are built on strong institutions, checks and balances, and an independent judiciary. The president has said publicly and privately that fundamental reforms like this require a broad basis of support to be durable and sustained. Anything else on Russia?
Russia?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Well, first I want the Israel question. I know that most
It's
of you
not
probably.
Russia.
No. First of all, you probably.
I will definitely come to you on it.
Okay, this is about Russia, but many of you probably know about Russia has a diplomatic relationship with Israel, but there's a backdrop to the issues. I want to ask about the Israel question brought up about Jenin, that city yesterday, about terrorists in Jenin attacking Israelis and Israelis' right to defend itself. Do you agree that the Palestinian Authority has full or shared blame for letting Jenin become a terrorist haven or industrial complex for weapons? And will you agree to discontinue aid to the Palestinian Authority as well as to the UN agencies UNRWA and UNESCO if they don't abolish their anti-Israel policies? And the next question is regarding Russia and Vilnius trip.
First of all, let me just say I at least somewhat respect your ability to describe that as a Russia question, because Israel has diplomatic relations with Russia. That was artfully done.
So do you.
So do we. Exactly. Second, I will say I don't have anything to add to my comments yesterday, which is we obviously support Israel's right to defend itself. What's the
Okay, about Vilnius trip. President Biden was in Vilnius. I was wanting to know about, Russia in the past actually desecrated the Jewish cemetery in Vilnius, Lithuania. Did President Biden address that issue, the desecration of the Jewish cemetery there? And did he make a statement about fully supporting the restoration of that Jewish cemetery as laid out and described in the website savevilna.org?
Obviously, we would oppose the desecration of any cemetery. I don't have any specific readout of the president's meetings to make. Jenny, let me come back to you, Jenny, because I've already had a...
Israel and Jenin, please.
Go ahead, on Jenin.
Israel and Jenin issues. It's going to follow up with what I asked just the other day. And thank you, by the way, Matt, for taking my questions. I have a background to the Jenin question. Today, under Oslo, the Palestinian Authority pledged to disarm militias
The PA was granted a police force armed and trained by the United States for that very purpose. And first, what happened to the PA police force of thousands and their weapons? Second, why isn't the State Department publicly criticizing Abbas and the PA for not doing as they promised? And thirdly, I want to reiterate my question from yesterday. Do you agree that the Palestinian Authority has full or shared blame for letting Jenin become a terrorist haven industrial complex for weapons?
I will say that obviously it is the responsibility of the Palestinian Authority to conduct appropriate law enforcement operations in its jurisdiction, but at the same time, it is it is appropriate for Israel to take appropriate steps to defend its security.
Thank you, Matt.